Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. My name is Ron Saathoff. I am past president of the San Diego City Firefighters and also a 20-year member of the board of directors of SERS. I began my board tenure in 1985, and your asset base at that time was about $400 million. And when I left the board, it was about $4 billion. So it's interesting to put things in context in the case of the market as it exists today. I wanted to give you just a brief historical perspective because I was the lead negotiator on the team that proposed drop and was successful in gaining it as a benefit for San Diego City employees back in 1996 and implemented in 1997. Language was put into effect at that time that the interest rate crediting would be the assumed rate of return. That actually was put into the Muni Code, and it was later removed without our knowledge. We weren't aware of it when it happened, but that was the intent, and there still exists MOU language both in the firefighters and other union contracts that specify that rate. The rate was done for a very straightforward reason. That's your long-term rate of return. That is what you are supposed to make as a system as a rate of return. That's the rate of return you pay on employee accounts, employer accounts, and any other interest crediting that the system undertakes is done at that long-term rate. There's been a lot of discussion about cost neutrality, and I think you should look into this in a little greater detail. I respect the actuary's work. I don't know exactly the basis in terms of the time history, and the reason I'm saying that is he has stated very clearly that his belief is that drop causes earlier age of retirement. That may be true in some plans, and a portion of that may be true here, but that analysis is incomplete if you don't take into account if the age of retirement has changed as a result of the formula change. See, in 1996, when we put this benefit in, the formula was significantly lower. In other words, the credit per years of service as a percentage was significantly lower, and the system had no cap, meaning that if you worked additional years, you accrued an additional benefit. In 1997, when this benefit was put together and when the formulas were increased, there was also a cap placed on the benefits, so that regardless of your length of service, you could not achieve greater than a 90% total benefit in terms of the SERS defined benefit plan. So what that meant was that when you reached 90%, if you continued to work, you got no additional benefit. There was no benefit whatsoever. Prior to that, there was. So obviously, when you increase the formula, a person is going to reach a higher percentage at a younger age based on years of service than the formula they were on previously. My question that I think you should review is when the experience study was done, I don't know, I mean, it's clear from the data that the number of retirements versus the prediction is different. The question is why, and what was that based on? When was that done? In other words, when was that formula set, and was it in fact adjusted back in 97 to reflect the difference in benefits and the difference in the cap? Because there is a dichotomy there, and I think if you were to do that analysis, you would see that the numbers are quite different. People, when they reach the 90%, are going to leave. If they continue to work, they're working for no additional benefit whatsoever. So that is a driving and motivating force. The second piece of cost neutrality that should be considered, and it is in the MOUs in the language of whether or not this would become a permanent benefit after the 3-year trial period, was a total cost both to the city and to SERS. The city, without any question, is saving a tremendous amount of money on drop. All you have to do is look at your actuary's report and look at what the cost per employee is as a percentage of salary paid for by the city to SERS on behalf of that employee as they're accruing benefits. In the case of a safety member, it's about 40% of payroll. It's a significant number. When that person enters drop, that number goes to 3.05%. In addition, when that person enters drop, they do not receive a paid health care benefit paid for by the city as a retired employee, which of course they would if they were in that benefited structure. So there is a significant, Lisa Irvine did a report several years back that estimated the savings at over $13 million a year then, and it did not take into account the health care. So I'm just suggesting to you two things. Number one is that the interest crediting at the assumed rate, and our local did write a letter asking that you modify and lower the rate to the assumed rate because that's what our MOU called for. When you made a decision to lower the rate to 7.75%, then that should accrue to the drop accounts as well because it is a long-term view, not a short-term view. Now, the mayor's presentation did give you a synopsis of a 5-year average of a market, and what I've heard in the testimony today is that you cannot apply that rate separately to the annuity rate. Well, if you're doing that, you have to consider that the annuity rate is not a 5-year return. That's not what you're looking at. You're looking at a long-term rate. So again, that's why we locked it in. We thought we had locked it in. Clearly, there has been changes that have taken place since then, but that was a fair and equitable rate to pay because that is your assumed rate of return over time, and over time you have achieved that going back 30 years. And it is a benefit to the employees. There's no question about that. But it is a benefit that was contemplated for and incorporated in the MOUs as an expense, if necessary, to the system paid for by the plan sponsor. So I thank you for your time. I look forward to reviewing all the documents and the testimony and everything for the November meeting. It's fairly comprehensive and it's well done, and I'd like the chance to review it before commenting further. But thank you for your time, Mr. Ebring, members of the board.